Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. Today we're plugging into the world of EV charging, especially how it impacts local businesses. Plus, we've got some interesting news from Congressman David Trone about this very thing.
I'm ready to dive in.
So, there's this new research in Nature Communications, and let me tell you, it really surprised us. We're not talking about just a small survey here. These researchers analyzed data from over 4,000 EV charging stations. And get this, 140,000 businesses all across California. They wanted to get a real sense of the connection.
Wow, that's a lot of data. What did they find?
Well, get this, installing even one new EV charging station, just one, led to a noticeable increase in annual spending at nearby businesses.
Really? Even with, EV adoption rates are still pretty low, right?
Exactly. In fact, back in 2019, businesses within, say, 100 meters of a charging station saw spending go up by 2.7%. That's a real impact, even at that early stage.
That's really interesting. What's fascinating to me is that this positive effect was apparent even when EV adoption rates were still relatively low. So just imagine the potential as more people switch to electric vehicles.
Right. And it's not just about the folks who already have EVs. This is bringing in new customers.
It really challenges that assumption that EV charging stations only benefit existing EV drivers.
Absolutely. So you might be thinking, okay, that makes sense for businesses right next door, but what about those a little further away?
Well, the study actually looked at that too, and they found that the closer a business was to a charging station, the more positive the impact tended to be.
Makes sense, right? The easier it is to walk over from the charging station.
Exactly. And this highlights the importance of where you put these charging stations.
Advancement, yeah.
It's not just about having them, it's about having them in the right spots to really benefit everyone, EV drivers and businesses. City planners, businesses, policymakers, they should all be thinking about this as they build out the EV infrastructure.
So we're seeing a link between EV charging stations, and it seems like there's a potential boost for local businesses. But, and this is where it gets even more interesting, what about the types of chargers?
Right, because it's not all the same, is it?
Exactly. This research dives into the differences between those DC fast chargers, the ones that can juice up your car in under an hour,
Right.
and then the level 2 chargers, which are much slower, but they're much more common.
Right.
So for those of you who are new to the EV world, think of it this way. A DC fast charger is like running into a cafe for a quick coffee and pastry.
Okay.
Level 2 charger is more like settling in for a full meal.
I like that.
Both will charge your car,
Sure.
but they create totally different experiences, and that could lead to different spending habits while you wait.
Exactly. And this study, it found that those DC fast chargers, they seem to draw in more customers, especially in areas with restaurants and shops.
That makes sense.
It makes you wonder, are people with fast chargers more likely to pop into local businesses because they're on a time crunch?
It's a really interesting thought, and this is where we start to see the real-world implications of this research. Now, remember Congressman David Trone? We mentioned him earlier.
Yeah, I'm interested to hear where he fits into all of this.
He's seen this research, and he's taking action. He's actually introduced a bill in Congress to bring these benefits to more communities, specifically small towns.
Oh, that's interesting.
But we'll get into the details of that in a bit. First, let's dig a little deeper into what the research tells us about how this impacts different income levels.
Right, because we want to make sure everyone benefits from this EV revolution.
Yeah.
Right, not just a select few. You're absolutely right to bring that up. That's a really important point about equity. And actually, this study did find that in 2019, installing EV charging stations brought a noticeable increase in customers across all income groups.
Okay, so everyone was benefiting. That's good news.
It is. However, from 2021 to 2023, that boost, it was more pronounced among the higher income groups.
That is interesting. So what do you make of that shift?
Well, it definitely raises some important questions, like who benefits most from EV infrastructure? And as we move forward, how can we ensure equitable access for everyone?
Right.
It's not just about, having charging stations. They need to be accessible and beneficial to everyone in the community. And that's something that policymakers really need to keep in mind as we move forward.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And this actually leads us perfectly to Congressman Trone and this new bill he's introduced.
Yeah.
You mentioned he's trying to make sure those small towns, they aren't left behind in this big transition to electric vehicles. So tell me more about the bill. What's it called, and what's he hoping to achieve with it?
The bill is called the Recharge EV Act.
Catchy.
And, well, the goal is to make sure that more funding for EV charging stations actually goes to small towns. Because right now, most of the federal funding for these chargers, it goes towards those that are along highways.
Yeah, you see them at the rest stops and stuff, which makes sense, right? I mean, if you're focused on that long distance travel.
Exactly. But if you think about it, this research suggests that these charging stations, they can actually boost local economies.
All right.
So we can't forget about the rural communities and those smaller towns.
Right, they need an economic boost too.
Exactly. And that's what Trone's bill is trying to do, bridge that gap. It's
Yeah.
saying, hey, let's not just think about getting from point A to point B.
Yeah.
Let's use this whole transition to electric vehicles to try and revitalize communities of all sizes.
I love that. So his strategy is to make it easier for these small towns to actually get the funding to install those charging stations.
Yes, precisely. And the thinking is, if they have the charging stations, it'll attract more people to stop. Maybe they need to charge up their car, they grab a bite to eat, they check out a local shop. It's about spreading those economic benefits more evenly.
That's really interesting. So we've got this research showing this clear link between the charging stations and these local businesses. And now we have a congressman who's trying to take that and apply it and help out these smaller communities. It seems like we're really seeing a change in how people are thinking about this.
Yeah, it really feels like something big is on the horizon. Think about it. As more people switch to electric cars, will those quick trips to the gas station be replaced with, longer stops at these charging stations?
That's a really interesting question.
And will that give people more time to actually check out those local businesses? It's exciting to think about the possibilities.
It really is. And I think Trone's bill is a good reminder that we need to be thinking ahead about all of this, be proactive as we make this transition. We really need to make sure that it benefits everyone, not just those who are in a position to take advantage right now. That's such an important point because let's be real, Trone's proposal is ambitious. I mean, changing how the federal government allocates funding, that's a tall order. What do you think realistically? What are the chances of this thing actually becoming law?
Well, it's an uphill battle for sure. This is just one bill, and it's got to go through, pretty complex system.
Mhm.
But I think even if it doesn't become law, the fact that he's bringing attention to this issue is significant in itself.
It's getting people talking.
Exactly. He's starting a conversation, raising awareness, and, sometimes that's the very first step to making a change.
Right. You got to identify the problem before you can fix it.
Exactly. And by shining a light on how these charging stations can help revitalize small towns, he's really pushing us to think differently about this whole transition to EVs. It's not just about the cars, it's about the communities too.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it seems like more and more people are starting to realize that this move towards electric vehicles, it has implications way beyond just cutting emissions.
Yep.
It's about creating jobs, building stronger communities, maybe even rethinking how we design our public spaces.
It's really exciting.
It's a really exciting time to be thinking about these issues. So, as we wrap up our deep dive for today, here's something I want you to consider. The next time you see an EV charging station, wherever it is, just take a second to think about where it's located. Is it next to a highway, a busy shopping center, or maybe it's tucked away on a quiet street in a small town?
Yeah.
How do you think that charging station is impacting those businesses and those people? Does it change how you see that place? We've covered a lot of ground today, from the nitty-gritty details of how those stations affect local businesses to the bigger picture of how this whole thing could totally reshape our communities in the years to come.
It's a lot to think about.
It is. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and until next time, stay curious, everyone.